A very warm welcome. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. It's been a year into Russian President Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine, and Russia has suffered a major strategic defeat. Of course, that excludes a few rare and small victories like Soledar and now Bakhmut. That's expected to be next. Nonetheless, Ukraine has achieved a major strategic victory. This, as the West has demonstrated a combination of resolve and unity that few had expected. But the war continues with no end in sight. Neither side is ready to negotiate, only because nobody exactly knows what Vladimir Putin wants. It was last year on February 24th that the Russian president declared war on Ukraine. He called it a military operation.
Народные республики Донбасса обратились к России с просьбой о помощи.
The People's Republic of Donbass asked Russia for help. In this regard, under Article 51, Part 7 of the Charter of United Nations, with the approval of Russian State Federal Council and in accordance with the Friendship and Mutual Assistance Treaties with the Donetsk People Republic and Luhansk People's Republic ratified by the Russian Parliament on February 22, I decided to conduct a special military operation. It aims to protect the people who have been bullied and subjected to genocide by Kiev regime for 8 years. For that, we will strive to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine and will bring to justice those who committed multiple bloody crimes against civilians, including Russian citizens.
It's hard to imagine what useful role nuclear weapons could possibly play in Putin's invasion of Ukraine, simply because any atomic use close to his own country would only cause death and contamination among his own troops and in Russia. And even if he uses nukes against the West, which has not intervened militarily till last year in Ukraine's defense, he would risk retaliation that could ultimately destroy the planet. But Putin did exactly that. Practically, nuclear weapons are generally used for one thing, that to deter the use of other nuclear weapons. But Russian military doctrine has recently introduced a new rationale. What is that? To escalate to de-escalate. And that requires threatening a nuclear strike in order to get an adversary to back down in a conventional fight. Now at home, Russia's economy on the surface appears to have weathered a series of Western sanctions. But its budget deficit has soared and oil and gas revenue has fallen dramatically. Any attempt to gauge Vladimir Putin's popularity is fraught with difficulty. But what's the status of dissent in Russia? Well, that's a highly risky proposition in the country, with jail sentences handed out for anyone spreading fake news about the Russian military. And those opposing Russia's leadership have either had to fled or, as with main opposition figure Alexei Navalny, been thrown into prison. But shifting focus back to the war, and the biggest success that President Vladimir Putin can lay claim to as far as this war is concerned is establishing a land bridge from Russia's border to Crimea. As a result, Russia no longer is reliant on its bridge over the Kerch Strait. So has Putin failed so far? The question is valid, especially since the Russian president is already gearing up for a renewed spring offensive. Apart from the genocide in Bucha's Russian military's failure has revealed gaps between Putin's ambition and the ground reality of his own defense forces. The retreat of 30,000 Russian troops across the Dnipro River from Kherson in November last year was a strategic failure. A 64-kilometer armored convoy that ground to a halt near Kiev at the start of the war was a logistical failure. The deaths of a large number of recently mobilized troops in a Ukrainian New Year missile attack on Makivka were an intelligence failure. And not just that, the sinking of the flagship Black Sea battlecruiser, the Moskva, was a defensive failure, as was the spectacular attack in October 2022 that shut the Kerch Strait bridge for a few weeks. But Putin, instead of de-escalating this war, has vowed to win Ukraine. In fact, he has blamed the West and suspended the Nuclear Disarmament Act.
Responsibility for fomenting the Ukrainian conflict, for its escalation, and for the increasing number of victims lies entirely with Western elites, and of course, the current regime in Kyiv, for which the Ukrainian people are essentially strangers.
Украинский сегодняшний режим обслуживает не национальные интересы. Элиты Запада
The Western elites do not conceal their goals. As they say, it is a direct quote to bring Russia a strategic defeat. What does it mean? What is it for us? It means to end us, once and for all. It means they plan to turn a local conflict into a global confrontation. We understand it exactly like that, and we will react to it accordingly. This is because in this case, it is about the very existence of our country.
But can Putin blame the West? The West claims that NATO's expansion comes as a response to the Russian threat. So much so, Sweden and Finland only applied to join because of the invasion in Ukraine. NATO member states have increasingly sent Ukraine air defense systems to protect its cities, as well as missile systems, artillery, and drones that helped turn the tide against Russia's invasion in Ukraine. But can it be blamed for the war? Ukraine's shift to the West has revealed a new partnership, just as Vladimir Putin has against the West. And that partnership that the Russian president has struck has challenged the existing order by forming his own triad of tyranny with partners China and Iran. Is this the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning?